Have you ever wondered why silence speaks louder than seduction? When you don't text back for 3 days, something strange begins to stir inside him. Not rage, not sadness, but a quiet storm, confusion laced with desire. It is in this silence, this pause in the dance, that a deeper part of his psyche awakens. The part ruled not by logic, but by ancient instinct. The shadow of the masculine, the part that craves to conquer, to possess, to decode what refuses to be understood. He tells himself he doesn't care. He shrugs it off in front of friends, claims he's busy, uninterested, emotionally untouchable. But beneath the surface, where ego meets archetype, a different drama is unfolding. One rooted in his unconscious need for validation, control, and affirmation. He is no longer just a man with a phone in his hand. He is a seeker caught in a void, staring into the abyss of your absence. For 3 days, you gave him no reaction. And in that vacuum, the male ego, so accustomed to being fed by affirmation, begins to starve. Not because you vanished completely, but because you withheld response without explanation. You didn't beg, you didn't chase, you didn't explain your silence. And that is the trigger. You see, most women don't realize this. It's not attention that captures a man's mind. It's the interruption of attention. The unexpected withdrawal, the unanswered moment. Like pulling a string just tight enough, then letting it dangle in midair. You didn't just step back, you disrupted the rhythm. And in doing so, you awakened something primal. Jung would call it a confrontation with the anima. The female figure in his psyche, who's both enchanting and elusive. The anima doesn't obey. She disappears. She doesn't text back on cue. She exists in her own time. And that mystery becomes unbearable for the man who is used to women explaining, emoting, apologizing, clarifying, but not you. Because when you go silent, you remind him that you are not available energy. You are not an emotional vending machine. You are not a script that plays out on his terms. You become the unknown. And in psychology, the unknown always compels more than the known. He rereads your last message 5 times. Did he miss something? Was there a tone he misread? A subtle disappointment he didn't catch? He wants to believe you're just busy, but a darker part of him begins to whisper, what if she's done playing the game? And that thought terrifies him more than losing you, because if you've stopped playing, it means he is no longer the one in control. And in a Machiavellian sense, that is the real fear. Not loss, but powerlessness. He begins to obsess, not over you but over himself in relation to you. He wonders what version of himself you're now imagining. Did he come across as too eager, too cold, too unsure? You've created a mirror he cannot look away from, and it's reflecting all the things he doesn't want to see. This is where the attraction deepens, not because you're cruel, but because you've introduced space. Space where he must confront his own emotional hunger. Space where he realizes your value wasn't in what you gave, but in what you withheld with grace. 3 days, 72 hours. Each tick of silence becomes a psychological ceremony. A slow erosion of his certainty. Not of your affection, but of his dominance in the dynamic. Because for once, he doesn't know where he stands. And a man who doesn't know where he stands starts to reach. He won't say it, of course. He'll act like nothing's wrong. He might even mirror your silence, hoping to regain the upper hand. But if you could peer behind the curtain of his curated composure, you'd see it, the endless scroll through old photos. The half-typed messages deleted before sending. The late-night thoughts that echo. Why hasn't she replied? And if he's truly Machiavellian, at heart calculated, strategic, emotionally armored, then your silence becomes the crack in his fortress. Because it wasn't expected. He knows how to deal with love. He knows how to handle drama, or tears, or anger, but absence. Absence is the one thing he can't manipulate. He can't argue with it. He can't win against it. He can only feel it. And that is where your power lies. He begins to replay every moment, not just your last message, but your tone, your laughter, your gaze when you last looked at him. Suddenly, your most ordinary gestures become sacred relics. In his mind, he mythologizes you, not because you changed, but because his access to you you became scarce. And in doing so, you became sacred. Scarcity doesn't mean neglect. It means value re-evaluated in the absence of reinforcement. It's a paradox. The less he hears from you, the more he listens for you. The more he feels your absence, the more his unconscious projects meaning onto it. He starts to assign storylines to your silence, some flattering, some terrifying. Maybe you're over him. Maybe you're testing him. Maybe you met someone else. Maybe you've risen above the need to explain your distance. Each possibility cuts differently, but all share one truth. You have stepped into his psychological blind spot, and the unknown breeds obsession faster than any confession ever could. This is not about games. It's about archetypal energy, what the ancients and mystics understood long before dating apps and psychology books. That feminine energy in its sovereign form does not explain itself. It evokes, it withdraws not to punish, but to preserve essence. You are not a breadcrumb trail for the anxious ego to follow. You are the forest in which he must wander without a map. Carl Jung taught that when the unconscious confronts something it cannot immediately understand, it forces the conscious mind to adapt, to evolve. And that is what your silence demands. Adaptation, growth, reflection. If he is mature enough, he will use this space not to resent you, but to revisit himself. But most men are not ready for that, so they spiral. The Machiavellian man, charming, calculated, disciplined, he is used to holding the frame, to being the one who defines how much connection, how much distance, how much power is on the table. But the moment you don't respond, when he expects you to, you take that frame and bend it silently. You do not fight him. You do not explain. You simply remove your energy. And in that stillness, something dies. His illusion of control. That's why the silence cuts deeper than words. Words can be argued with. Silence, on the other hand, is a mirror with no cracks. It shows him himself unfiltered. You may think he's forgotten you. You may worry he's moved on. But what's truly happening is far more complex. He's performing detachment while simultaneously feeling more attached. And because he can't predict your next move, his ego starts to flail. This is the power of unpredictability, not as manipulation, but as the natural result of detachment. True detachment, the kind that grows from self-worth and emotional discipline, is never loud. It doesn't announce itself. It simply is. And it reshapes the entire dynamic without a single word. You're not punishing him. You're preserving your polarity. You see, when you don't text back, you're not withholding love, you're withholding access. And there's a difference. Access is earned through resonance, not demand. Through presence, not pursuit. Through alignment, not attention-seeking. And this is where many women lose their center. They fear being forgotten. But the truth is, a woman who knows how to be still in her energy will never be forgotten. She lingers not because she's loud, but because she's rare. His mind becomes the echo chamber of your quiet confidence. It haunts him not like a ghost, but like a song he cannot stop humming. You didn't say much. You didn't say anything. And yet he hears you everywhere. Because what truly haunts a man is not rejection. It's the unknown, the unclaimed, the memory that doesn't rot from overuse, but ripens in absence. You are not a reaction. You are not a notification. You are the silence after the storm calm. Sovereign, unfazed, and deep down, he knows. You could text him at any moment. You could give him the closure he craves, the comfort he needs, the attention he's used to. But you don't. And in that choice, you rise. There is something unnerving to the male psyche about a woman who chooses stillness over chaos. Not because she's cold, but because she's centered. Because she doesn't need his response to validate her reality. While the world teaches women to chase, to clarify, to caretake even in the face of emotional negligence, you break that pattern with silence. Not apathy, but self-possession. And now he senses it. That this isn't a game you're playing, this is a level of mastery you've claimed. He scrolls through your social media with muted anxiety. He checks your stories, sees your name, your presence, your glow, but still no message. It doesn't make sense to him. If you were upset, you'd say it. If you were interested, you'd respond. But instead, you exist somewhere beyond logic, beyond emotional currency. You've become elemental, a presence he can't reduce to a role or label. To the Machiavellian mind, trained in strategy, in outcomes, in control, this is infuriating. He can't categorize you. He can't even strategize his next move because you haven't revealed your position. He doesn't know if you're watching, if you're done, if you're waiting, or if you've already forgotten. And that ambiguity becomes obsession. But it's not about ego anymore. Your absence has awakened a confrontation within him between the man he pretends to be and the man he actually is when no one's watching. And for the first time in a long time, he must feel himself through your silence. What is it in you that he misses? The sound of your voice, the way you made space for him. Or is it deeper? Did you reflect something he lost long ago? His sense of being seen without performance. His softness that he buried under charm and detachment. You were never just a woman in his life. You were a mirror to his deeper nature. And now that mirror has turned away. This is the beginning of something far more powerful than desire. It is the birth of longing, not for your body, but for the access to himself that only you seem to unlock. The peace he felt in your presence, the calm behind his ego, the quiet after the chase. 3 days, it's a short time on a clock, but in emotional gravity, it's a lifetime. Because when you don't chase after misunderstanding, you give a man the gift of seeing how he misplaces his own worth. You give him his own reflection without saving him from it. And this terrifies him. He may try to distract himself with work, with other women, with routines. But none of them threaten his ego like you do. Because they don't have your stillness. They don't have your restraint. They don't possess that magnetic mystery that comes not from pretending, but from knowing exactly who you are and never needing to explain it. You didn't ghost him. You didn't punish him. You simply stopped proving your place. In his life, you let your energy withdraw. And now he's forced to ask the question he never wanted to ask. Did I ever deserve her attention in the first place? This is where his mind begins to fracture. Not because you left, but because he never realized how much of his identity was anchored in your presence. And now that you've gone still, he must face himself without your emotional scaffolding. And yet, through all this chaos, he still won't text. Not yet, because part of him is still trying to win the game he believes you're playing. He wants to appear unaffected, but his silence is heavy, not holy. Yours is pure. His is reactive. Yours is rooted. You are not waiting. You are not worrying. You are not wavering. You are walking yourself home back to your worth, your peace, your power. He may reach out eventually, maybe on the 4th day, maybe the 7th. But the moment he does, it will be with a different tone. Less dominance, more reverence. Not because you demanded it, but because you earned it through your absence. That is the feminine paradox. The less you try to be chosen, the more your value becomes undeniable. He will text, but it won't be casual. It will carry a strange weight, light words, heavy with unspoken tension. Maybe it's just hey. Maybe it's a meme. Maybe a question that doesn't really need an answer. But behind every pixel, what he's really asking is, are you still within my reach? He won't admit it. His ego won't allow him to confess that 3 days without you felt longer than some relationships he's had. That he thought of texting a dozen times and held himself back each time, hoping you would break first. So he wouldn't have to surrender the illusion of power. But you didn't. And now, here he is. A man rehearsing vulnerability behind a screen. This is when your true power crystallizes, not in how you reply, but in what energy you don't give away. You see, to the unconscious male, the woman who texts too quickly, too eagerly, becomes a mirror of his mother wound, the one who overgives, who always comes when called, who patches the holes in his emotional immaturity. But the woman who waits, who holds her silence with dignity, who meets his delayed message with presence, not performance, she becomes a mirror of his higher self. And that is far more powerful than attraction. Because this isn't about texting, it never was. It's about the power balance between masculine and feminine energy, about how quickly roles reverse when a woman stops trying to be understood and instead rests in being unshakable. Now he begins to reevaluate everything he thought he knew about you. In the beginning, he may have labeled you sweet, caring, maybe even predictable. He thought he knew the patterns, but when you broke the pattern, when you didn't fill the silence with reassurance, when you left his message untouched like a wineglass at an empty table, he had no playbook left. And the feminine that cannot be predicted becomes unforgettable. This is the very reason so many powerful men fall hardest, not for the loudest woman in the room, but for the one whose silence echoes. She doesn't need to convince, her absence speaks. Her energy lingers like incense long after the flame goes out. Jung spoke of the individuation process, the sacred path of separating from the unconscious projections of others and becoming whole within oneself. This is your individuation. The moment you separate from the compulsion to please, to prove, to perform. The moment you realize your value is not tied to how fast you respond or how much space you occupy in his inbox, but how deeply you're rooted in your own self-worth. It is not coldness. It is clarity. Because while he wrestled with thoughts of, should I reach out? You were resting in a deeper truth, that you do not chase clarity, you embody it. You don't beg for connection. You attract it through your sovereignty. And now he feels it. He senses that something is different, not just in you, but in the dynamic. It's not just that you didn't text back. It's how whole you seemed in your absence. How undisturbed, how untouched by the performance of longing. It forces him to ask himself the question he's avoided for years. What do I bring to a woman who doesn't need to be rescued, who doesn't need to be soothed, saved, or entertained? The answer scares him big, because now, it's no longer about conquest. It's about capacity. Can he meet you where you are? Can he rise to your emotional altitude? Can he become a man, not just in biology, but in presence? That is the invitation you extend, not through a text, but through your silence. Not through attachment, but through inner freedom. Not by chasing, but by choosing. And should you decide to respond when, how, or if you will not do so from a place of fear. Not to reattach, not to reclaim, but simply to respond from fullness. Not for him, but for you. Because this is no longer about him needing you, it's about whether you still want him. You are no longer the girl waiting for a reply. You are the woman he waits for quietly, anxiously, beneath his curated detachment. He may still play the role of the unaffected man, the one who's too busy, too rational to be swayed by silence. But inside, he is beginning to fracture, not because he lost you, but because he realizes he never truly held you. What he held was access. What he held was rhythm. What he held was your response, your presence, your emotional generosity. And now that you've taken it back without protest, without noise, he feels the hollowness left behind. This is where the psychological weight of your absence becomes unbearable. Not because he's desperate for your body, but because your stillness forced him to meet himself. And that is a meeting most men are not prepared for. The masculine shadow, as Jung described, is filled with delusions of control. It believes love is a transaction, that if he gives just enough affection, enough charm, enough curated vulnerability, he will win. But your silence disrupts that belief. It tears down the illusion that love is earned through performance. You showed him that presence must be met with presence. Depth must be met with depth. And games may die in the hands of a woman who plays none. You see, you didn't disappear. You simply stopped overextending. And there's a difference. The woman who disappears does so in reaction. The woman who stops chasing does so in power. You chose sacred stillness. Not to manipulate, but to return home to your center. To remind yourself that your heart is not a marketplace. That your love is not on sale to the highest bidder of breadcrumbs and half-truths. That your attention is a gift, not a habit. And now, he knows it too. It's in the hesitation before he hits send. In the extra seconds he stares at your profile, wondering what you're thinking. Wondering if you're done, or simply above the need to say anything at all. It's in the way his dreams begin to fragment images of you appearing and vanishing, like smoke. He cannot grip you anymore, because you are no longer trying to be held. You've stepped into the unknown, and now he is the one uncertain. But, more importantly, you are finally certain not about him, but about yourself. That is the real transformation. This silence, this space, this detachment, it is not cold. It is sacred fire. It burns away every impulse in you that once needed to explain, to earn, to rush into connection for fear of being forgotten. Because you've learned that the feminine does not chase what is hers. She magnetizes it. She becomes it. And if he returns it, he texts again. If he calls, if he knocks, you will not respond as the woman you were. The woman who once waited, who once questioned her silence, who once feared being misunderstood. No, you will meet him from the mountain, not the valley. With clarity, not need. With discernment, not longing. Because now you understand something most never do. A man cannot miss what he never truly felt he could lose. But once you step away, not in anger, not in noise, but in full self-ownership, he realizes what he once had access to was rare, and it's that rarity that haunts him. The woman who doesn't text back for 3 days isn't ghosting. She's glowing. She's realigning. She's remembering that her worth is not up for confirmation, but for recognition. And if he sees that, truly sees it, not just in admiration, but in reverence, then maybe, just maybe, he's worth a reply. But if not, she still rises. Because she is no longer the echo of a man's desire. She is the voice of her own awakening. And in that awakening, she becomes unforgettable. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.